Just checking. I have 20 minutes, right?
Well, yeah, approximately a little bit less, and then we can have discussion. 20 minutes in total, telling and
Okay,
discussion.
with discussion. Okay. So, hello, I am Valentina Ortiz. I am from Mexico. It's a huge, huge honor to be among you today. Well, for me tonight, for you to the daytime. And yes, just like Barry, I want to work with the theme of love because it is Valentine's Day, which is a U.S. invention, but now we also use it in Mexico. And it's my Saint's Day, you could say, because I am Valentina. And so I will tell two short stories because we are coming out, maybe, or we are still in the pandemic mood. And for me, these months of seclusion and these months of seeing myself and of vulnerability have taught me so much. And the main teachings, I think, are about love. The first thing I discovered with love is that I was in a very small town locked up for many months, and I fell madly in love with trees. Trees are the most perfect beings you could possibly imagine. Plants, they're the only ones that are self-sufficient. They make their own food. We have to go out and depend on other people, on the land, on the sun. They, using the sun and the land, make their own food. So, first story is a short story that I made for trees. On the top of the little hill is a beautiful sweet gum, liquidambar in Spanish. Oh, and it's so proud up there, and it fluffs up its leaves, and it likes to feel the breeze in its branches, and it looks so far away from there. He can see the river, he can see the valley, the little prairie right next to his hill. And during spring, one afternoon, a beautiful being walked into that little prairie. It was a she deer, a dawn. And she was so perfect, that brown color and her thin legs, walking and jumping suddenly, enjoying herself. And those eyes, oh, he felt he could see the whole world in her big black eyes. And he fell madly in love. He could feel his heart pounding every afternoon when the dawn arrived and did her thing. She was eating, she was enjoying the sun on her skin. And summer came. And he kept fluffing up and becoming more and more handsome. Oh, but the fruits. He had these fruits dangling from his branches, all different places, and they were like these prehistoric balls with little spikes on them. They were round, and then they became brownish, and oh, they were so ugly. But the dawn was so beautiful. And then fall came. And with fall, suddenly this really cold wind arrived, announcing that winter was about to come. And Dawn, he could see her shaking. She was so cold. And suddenly, she did the strangest thing. She started to walk closer and closer to his hill. And then she started to climb. His heart was pounding so loud he was sure she could hear it. And she climbed and climbed and climbed. And he was excited, but oh no, no, no. Make her turn around, make her turn around. And then she came right underneath his branches. And she literally cuddled next to his trunk. Oh, it felt so good, but his heart was pounding. And then she looked up, and he remembered his fruit. No, his fruit, his horrible, dangling, spiky, brown fruits were there. Oh, he was so embarrassed. He blushed. His whole top, his whole leaves turned red and brown, and she didn't leave, no. She stayed. She didn't notice the fruits. She was so comfortable. That trunk was protecting her from the cold air, and it was warm, and he could feel her warmth. And then suddenly, she noticed the smell, the amazing smell. You have to understand, the sweet gum, liquidambar, is the one that gives us the incense, el copal. And oh, she started to rub her back on his trunk, and the smell, oh, it bathed both of them. And yes, you guessed it, The next day, she came for more. She cuddled, she rubbed herself, and he was so embarrassed of his fruit that he turned red again. Oh, but he liked it also. His heart was pounding, and he exuded all the heat he could. And that happened for several weeks. And then winter came, and deers, I don't know where they go, but they disappear when it's very cold out. And he was very happy because he lost all his leaves. I mean, that was really embarrassing. But it was good because that way he could take the sap out of his trunk, and if he froze, he wouldn't explode. And spring came quickly. And oh, he put out the most beautiful leaves he could. And yes, she arrived. There she was. Oh, she didn't go up at the beginning. All spring, she just did her thing, but she knew he was looking. And then summer came, and his fruits were dangling again. And then, oh, it started to get chilly, and yes, she went up the hill, and she rubbed herself against his trunk, and she, don't look up, don't look up. And she looked up, and he got so embarrassed, and he turned red. And then she came for more, and that smell of incense. And this went on for several years. But you know, deers don't live as long as trees. And one winter, she disappeared. She did not come back in spring at all. He waited patiently, spring, summer, and in fall he knew she would not return. But he decided that he would turn red anyways, because he knew that she would notice it wherever she was. She would know that he would never forget the fragrance of that eternal love. And since then, yes, sweet gums in the United States, maybe in Canada, definitely in Mexico, they turn red and orange and brown in fall. That is one love story. The other thing I discovered during pandemic is that life is not a marketplace. Life is not about trading. In Mexico, we have been taught that you have to suffer to be happy, that you have to give an offering to receive. So all my life, I give and expect to receive. Sometimes I don't receive, sometimes I receive, but it's always this exchange. And locked up, I suddenly realized, thanks to the next story and to the words of my friend Robin Beatty, I discovered that there's something called unconditional love, and that I deserve love. I deserve the right to be happy just because of the miracle that I am alive and on this world. That I can have enough food and enough housing. I can travel just because I am Valentina. The following story is a hard story, but believe it or not, it's the story that turned my mind. It is by Rosario Castellano, one of the most amazing writers of Mexico, and the story is called The Truce. Rominka Perez. She was climbing that hill just the way she did every day, 2 p.m., up the hill. Rominka was thin. Rominka was stiff so the water would not fall from her head. She was carrying the water in the jug. She was a stone woman, just like all the other women in her village. Her eyes talked of disease and hunger, but she was alive. Oh, she was climbing that hill as she did every day, when suddenly, out of nowhere, appeared a white man. Yes, a Gaxlan. And he stood there in front of her, grunting. Amazing. He was grunting. His hair was all standing up. He was so dirty. His clothes were broken. His hands were all cracked. And he grunted. And she asked him very nicely in her language. It's like, what do you need? What can I do? Why are you here? He just grunted back. Those two characters standing there on that sharp hill in that place called Mugenja. Mugenja, way up in the Chiapas Mountains in the south of Mexico, where the land is so dry it cracks by itself. In that place where the wind does not want to be, the wind arrives to that mountain and flees howling. The place where the sun is cold. The two characters there, moving very slowly, like those in a nightmare. And yes, Rominka had learned since she was a little girl that everything has an owner. the place you stand on, where you walk. The air you breathe is only lent. It has an owner. And if you take something without asking for permission, without giving in exchange, then you will be punished. Oh, yes. And there where she lived, the witches, the male witches, los brujos, oh, they explained to the people that the owner of that dry, harsh place is the Bokuch, an evil spirit. The Bokuch was invisible. Oh, and he feeds on the heart desires of humans. He is so evil that he will make you turn your back on your neighbor. He will close your heart so you cannot connect. He is the one that brings wars. He brings hunger and leaves it there. He is so evil he dries the wombs and the breasts of the women. But the grandparents, oh, they were smart. They caught him. Yes, they put an offering right outside the mouth of the cave. It was wrapped in a net, food with seeds. It was pozol made out of corn and even eggs. And next to it, a big jug of bush alcohol. Who can resist alcohol? Of course the Bokuch went out, and he drank the whole jug and ate everything and literally passed out. The grandparents arrived and tied him up with tight knots. And those who are still alive still remember the howling of the Bokuch. Oh, he howled in such a terrible way that the roots of the mountain shook. But nobody knows why, maybe fear, maybe alliance, let him loose. And now the Bokuch is even angrier than before, and he's a shapeshifter. He can become an animal. He can even become a white man, a caxtlan. He is so angry that if you bump into him up there in the mountains, oh yes, he will make you change. You will come home, yes, but your hands will be shaking. You can't grab anything. Your eyes will be empty and your cheeks will be sucked in. And your family will make a circle around you and yell out your name. But the person is lost. They become mad. Rominka Perez, she knew she did not want to become mad, oh, or die. No, she had children that needed her. Her husband loved her. So she knew she could not run away. You can't flee the Bokuch. So she decided to beg, to implore. She went on her knees and looked down and started to talk. She knew that with her humiliation, maybe the gods would feed their hunger for truth. And she implored, and then suddenly her words became confessions. The scab of her guilt peeled off, and out poured white pus from that tumor. And she spoke of fear, she spoke of treason, she spoke of lust. But it wasn't enough. The gods wanted more. The Bokuch pushed her really strong, and she yelled out, stood up, grabbed her jug, and ran to the village. And the white man ran behind her. He was stumbling. He just grunted and lifted and waved his arms. She finally arrived at the village, and before locking herself in her house, she dropped the jug and the water spilled. The eyes of the women of the village saw when the white man arrived and threw himself on the ground and put his face in the puddle and lapped the water desperately. A little boy was watching. He ran to warn the men. The men were in the fields. The fields. Those fields that are so dry and tired that they only give little corn that is not enough to feed anybody. The seeds are like ashes in your stomach. The men now are making their own alcohol. They have no choice, but they don't complain. When the big pot explodes and burns, they just run up into the mountains and howl until they die. But down in the village, in the white village, in the Chamula village, oh, the sellers started saying, "Where are the Indians? Why don't they buy any alcohol? They cannot live without alcohol. They need it for their rituals. The babies, they give them alcohol in a little piece of cloth to suck. Where are they?" Well, the municipal secretary got so angry, he climbed on his horse and called his assistants. "We're going up there." And they climbed. And the higher they went, the angrier Mr. Rodolfo Lopez got. And then the rain came down, and he got even angrier. And finally they went up way to the tip to Muqueca. Oh, he knew it was in those houses that they were making the alcohol. When he got off his horse, his anger grew still a little bit more because he knew there nobody would know what he did. He could do anything he wanted. So he gave the order, yes. And when those houses were on fire and the people ran out to save their lives, he took his rifle and pushed them back inside the house. And the sound of those people crying out and the smell of the burnt flesh calmed Rodolfo. He left. He knew he had taught them a lesson and they would not make their alcohol anymore. But now, a few weeks later, they were making their alcohol in Bush. The men knew that you can't run away from the evil spirit, from Pokujo, from the white man, and that they are the only ones that will go way up into the mountains where they are. So the men followed the little boy back to the town, and they arrived. And there was the white man on the ground, and he tried to get up, but he fell again. And the men were expecting violence, conflict, but when they saw the weakness, they got angry. Ooh, their anger exploded in their chest. And then Rominka spoke, and she mentioned the word Bokuch, and they were even angrier because Bokuch meant death, but Bokuch meant disease. Bokuch is the one that steals their lambs. The eldest of the men went up to the white man and said, "What do you want? Don't you have enough? Why do you come to our village? What do you want from us now?" But the Gaxlan did not answer. And that is when it happened. One of the women grabbed holy incense and made a circle around the Bokuch so he couldn't flee. The men grabbed whatever they found, a rock, a big stick, or the machete, their big, big knife, and they hit. With the stick, they broke the bones. With the rock, they smashed the head. And with the machetes, they cut. The women howled to encourage them. After the deed, the dogs lapped the blood. And then frenzy started, alcohol. They cried out all night, they danced. The howls of death filled the mountains. The next morning, they didn't remember anything. They just had this dry feeling in their mouths, and their muscles were sore. But they felt better. Now, oh, now things are going to be good. We're going to have enough food to eat every day. But that was one of the worst years. The crops, they dried completely, and the children died of hunger. And they knew that they had to keep feeding the eaters of lambs, the eaters of people. They knew that to survive, my people had to kill again. Thank
Okay, thank you so much. Hmm. Anybody, thoughts, comments, questions, resonations?
Well, I just want to say, wow, Valentina, your facial expressions are so vibrant and so varied. I feel like just watching your face, we've run the gamut of human emotion, and I've seen every possible thing you can express. Yeah.
you.
And I love the resonance, with the dryness of the land and the watering, taking us back to Smita's story about the cracked pot. There's a little bit of connection there.
Yes. Make a comment. I have been telling this story. I never tell these kind of stories. Some of you know me. I actually had a station called Radio Hope, Radio Esperanza. But as I talked with Jim Brule about this, I think the wounds are there. And if we talk about healing stories, sometimes we have to talk about the wounds. I don't usually do it, but for me, this was a healing story because I suddenly realized this is so bad. And it made me look at myself and realize that this way of seeing love and life is not healthy for me. And I made the change.
Valentina, a beautiful performance, like I've already mentioned there. And what is most enjoyable was the first story because it was short and it was simple. The second one was, I think, took a little longer because it's to do with a monster. It's to do with extremities. So, it took me a little time really, but the first one was short and sweet, but still it had a very, very strong message. So both of them actually, one has gained a lot through the message and beautiful performance. I mean, it's such a pleasure, Eric, really watching all of them. It's my first time round really getting to see, but being on, seeing the international artists, whereby you people have been telling stories since Lord knows how long. For us, everything is new. So, I mean, watching, the spectacular performances is amazing. So thank you so much.
I love. Can I go? Yeah.
Yes, of course.
I loved the way you transition from both the stories. Like the first one was, completely your expressions of love with the tree and all. But the second one was intense yet completely different from the first one. So the way you transition between both the two stories and still giving out, those emotions was awesome. Thank you so much, Valentina.
Okay. So thank you very much. And now
Goodbye. And hello to my friend from Central Park.